What would you do if you found out that your best friend's parents were hiding something so perverse that even the most horrific crime reports would pale in comparison? In the small town of Vyazma, lost among the dense forests of the Smolensk region, behind the neat fence of an ordinary-looking house number 17 on Lesnaya Street, the Zakharchenko family had kept their secrets for decades. Secrets that made your blood run cold and your legs buckle. Secrets that should never have left the confines of their home. On a cold October morning in 2018, when the first frost covered the withered grass, and the air was filled with the smell of fallen leaves and smoke from the stoves, no one could have imagined that a routine call to the local police officer regarding a noise complaint from neighbors would turn into one of the most shocking investigations in the history of modern Russia. An investigation, the materials of which were classified and marked case closed by the highest authorities. If you are interested in similar stories based on real events, please subscribe to the channel. We explore the darkest pages of human history, which official sources prefer not to mention. Anastasia Petrova, a young district police officer who had only graduated from the Ministry of Internal Affairs Academy 6 months prior, had never encountered such cases before. She was 23 years old, and most of her work consisted of resolving minor domestic conflicts and drawing up protocols for intoxicated citizens. That morning, she received another complaint from the Zakharchenko's neighbors, who had heard strange screams coming from the house at night. "I'm calling for the 3rd time this month. Something is wrong there," claimed Maria Stepanovna, an elderly woman from the house across the street. "I have lived in this area for 30 years and know this family. They have always been strange, but lately such sounds come from there, as if someone is crying, but with an unusual cry. It doesn't sound like normal human crying." Anastasia didn't pay much attention to the elderly woman's words, dismissing them as mere curiosity and exaggeration, typical of older people. She walked slowly down the street, covered with fallen leaves, towards the Zakharchenko's house, inhaling the cold air and thinking about how to finish this call quickly and return to the warmth of the station. The Zakharchenko family's house was an old 2-story structure made of logs darkened by time, with a dilapidated porch and small windows, curtained with thick drapes that didn't allow even a ray of light to penetrate. Around the house was a high wooden fence, rotten in places, but still strong. The gate creaked as Anastasia pushed it open. She walked up the porch and knocked on the door. No one answered. She knocked harder, listening to the sounds inside the house. There was some rustling, muffled voices, but no one hurried to open the door. When she was about to knock for the 3rd time, the door slowly opened, and a pale face of a middle-aged woman appeared in the crack. Her dull, gray eyes looked warily at the guest. "Elena Zakharchenko?" Anastasia asked. "I am District Police Officer Petrova. I received a complaint from neighbors about the noise." The woman nervously licked her lips and opened the door a little wider. "There was no noise," she said in a quiet, almost whispering voice. "We are all right. You were misinformed." At that moment, a strange sound came from the depths of the house, something between a moan and a muffled scream. Anastasia frowned. "What was that? Who is in there?" That's the television," Elena Zakharchenko said hastily, instinctively trying to close the door. "My husband is watching some movie." But the experienced eye of the police officer noticed drops of something resembling blood on the woman's sleeve. "You have blood on your clothes. What happened? Does someone need help?" Elena lowered her gaze to her sleeve and froze, as if not knowing what to answer. At that moment, the door swung open sharply, and a tall man with a stern face and deep-set eyes appeared on the threshold. It was Viktor Zakharchenko, the head of the family. "What's going on?" he asked in a gruff voice. "We are not doing anything illegal." Anastasia introduced herself and explained the reason for her visit. Viktor Zakharchenko looked her up and down and reluctantly invited her to enter. "Come in and see for yourself that everything is in order," he said with poorly concealed irritation. Crossing the threshold of the Zakharchenko's house, Anastasia immediately sensed that something was wrong. There was a strange smell in the air, a mixture of dampness, stale food, and something else that she couldn't identify. The smell was heavy, thick, almost tangible. In the dimly lit hallway, there was a mess. Dirty shoes were lying on the floor, and old, yellowed photographs in frames hung on the walls. "Come into the living room," Victor said, pointing to the door on the right. The living room looked unexpectedly clean and tidy compared to the hallway. The furniture was old, but well-maintained. There was a vase with artificial flowers on the table, and even more photographs on the walls, depicting the Zakharchenko family at different periods of their lives. Anastasia noticed that in all the photographs, Elena was holding children, even those who looked too old to be carried. In one of the pictures, taken judging by the date in the corner only 5 years ago, Elena was hugging a young man who looked about 16 years old. Their poses were strangely intimate for a mother and son of that age. "Do you have children?" Anastasia asked, pointing to the photographs. "Yes, 3, Victor replied. "The oldest, Alexei, already lives separately. The middle one, Maria, is studying in Moscow. Only the youngest, Igor, is at home." "How old is he?" Anastasia inquired. 18, replied Elena, who quietly entered the room behind them. "He is special." At that moment, that strange sound that Anastasia had heard earlier sounded again. It came from somewhere above, from the second floor. "What is that?" she asked, heading towards the stairs. "Stop!" Victor blocked her path. "You can't go there. Igor is sick. He needs rest. If your son is sick, maybe he needs medical attention," Anastasia suggested, trying to get around the man. "No, we have our own doctor," Victor replied sharply. "He regularly visits Igor." While they were talking, Anastasia noticed a strange detail. There was a notebook with a tattered cover on the table, with yellowed sheets sticking out of it. The cover read, "Observation Diary Easy." She involuntarily reached for the notebook, but Elena quickly grabbed it and clutched it to her chest. "This is personal," she said in a trembling voice. Anastasia began to feel that something wrong, something sinister, was happening in this house. Her professional intuition told her that she needed to dig deeper. "I would like to speak with your son," she said firmly. Victor and Elena exchanged glances. Fear was evident in their eyes. "That's impossible," Victor finally said. "As I said, he is sick and cannot receive anyone." "In that case, I must insist on inspecting the entire house," Anastasia said, trying to speak confidently, although anxiety was growing inside her. "I have reason to believe that there may be a person here who needs help." "You don't have a warrant," Victor retorted. "You have no right to inspect our house without our consent or without the appropriate documents." He was right, and Anastasia knew it. But she also knew that she couldn't just leave, leaving everything as it was. "In that case, I will return with a warrant and reinforcements," she said, heading towards the exit. When she was already at the door, Elena suddenly grabbed her hand. "Wait," she said quietly, so that her husband wouldn't hear. "Take this." She discreetly slipped a small object into Anastasia's jacket pocket. "Read it when you are alone," she whispered. Anastasia nodded and left the house. Only after reaching the street did she take out of her pocket what Elena had given her. It was a small flash drive wrapped in electrical tape. The tape was marked in red marker, "The truth about the Zakharchenko family." What Anastasia Petrovna discovered on this flash drive changed her life forever and launched an investigation that shook not only the small town of Vyazma, but the entire country. The flash drive contained several folders titled with dates, starting from 1998, the year of birth of the Zakharchenko's eldest son, Alexei. Each folder contained text documents and photographs. Anastasia opened the first document and began to read, "Observation Diary, Elena Zakharchenko, March 21st, 1998. Today, our firstborn, Alexei, was born. Victor insists on starting the experiment immediately. I agreed, although I fear the consequences. We started recording all the data, frequency of feedings, duration, the child's reaction. Victor says that this is a revolutionary method of education that will make our son special." Anastasia scrolled further and saw entries dated 2000. Alexei is 2 years old. Ordinary children at this age no longer need breastfeeding, but our experiment continues. Victor is recording all the changes in Alexei's behavior. He is indeed different from other children. More calm, obedient, completely dependent on me. Sometimes this scares me, but Victor says that we are doing something important. With each page, the entries became more and more alarming. Elena described how she continued to breastfeed Alexei until he was 7 years old, how other children were born, Maria in 2000 and Igor in 2004, and how they also became part of this horrifying experiment. There were photographs confirming everything described in the diary, images that took Anastasia's breath away. But the most shocking thing was that Viktor Zakharchenko turned out to be not just a crazy father. According to the documents on the flash drive, he was a former researcher at a closed research institute of psychology, where studies on mind control and the formation of complete psychological dependence were conducted in the 90s. The studies were discontinued as unethical, but Victor decided to continue them on his own children. The most recent entries, dated 2018, concerned the youngest son, Igor, who was 14 years old at the time. Igor is completely dependent on my milk. He cannot eat regular food without experiencing vomiting attacks. When I tried to wean him, he started having seizures and hallucinations. Victor says that this is normal, that this is a sign of the experiment's success, but I can't take it anymore. This is torture for Igor and for me. My body is exhausted. I must stop this, but I don't know how. Victor monitors my every move. He threatens to take the children away and continue the experiment without me if I refuse to cooperate. In the very last entry, dated just a week earlier, Elena wrote, "I have decided. I must stop this madness. I have collected all the evidence, and tomorrow I will go to the police. It's better for me to be arrested as an accomplice than for this to continue. Igor is fading. He can no longer get out of bed. His addiction is complete, absolute. Alexei ran away 3 years ago, and I don't know what happened to him. Maria is in Moscow, but Victor controls her through daily calls. I must save at least Igor while it's not too late." Obviously, Elena never decided to go to the police. Instead, she gave the flash drive to Anastasia, hoping that the young police officer could do what she herself didn't have the courage to do. Anastasia immediately reported her findings to her superiors. The initial reaction was skeptical. The story seemed too incredible, too monstrous to be true. But the evidence on the flash drive was irrefutable. Permission was obtained to search the Zakharchenko's house and detain the couple. When the police arrived at the house on Lesnaya Street, Viktor Zakharchenko put up fierce resistance. He shouted that the police had no right to interfere in his family life, that his research was of great scientific importance. Elena, on the other hand, seemed almost relieved when she was arrested. On the second floor of the house, in a small room with a barred window, they found Igor. What they saw shocked even the most seasoned police officers. The 18-year-old boy looked like a 12-year-old child, emaciated with pale, almost transparent skin, with eyes full of fear and pain. He could not speak, only made strange sounds, the same ones that the neighbors had heard. A medical examination showed that his body was completely depleted, and his psyche was irreversibly damaged. Other evidence was found in the house. Diaries with detailed records of the experiment, photographs, videos, medical preparations that Victor had used to stimulate lactation in Elena for many years. Some of these drugs were experimental, not clinically tested. But the most frightening discovery awaited the investigators in the basement of the house. There, in a specially equipped laboratory, they found evidence that Zakharchenko's experiment was much larger than it seemed initially. Victor corresponded with other researchers from different cities in Russia and even from abroad. He exchanged data, methods, and results. There was a whole network of such experimenters using their own children to conduct inhuman experiments. In one of the folders were photographs of other children, dozens of photographs of boys and girls of different ages with empty eyes and lifeless faces. On the back of each photograph were written the name, age, and some code designations. The investigation suggested that these might be children who were kidnapped to participate in experiments, but no evidence was found. During the investigation, it turned out that Viktor Zakharchenko was not just a former researcher. In the 90s, he participated in a secret program to study methods of psychological control, funded by the state. The program was closed in 1996 due to ethical violations, but Victor continued the research independently, using his own family as a laboratory. His theory was that prolonged breastfeeding lasting for years, combined with certain psychological methods and pharmacological preparations, could create an absolute psychological dependence of the child on the mother, and through her on whoever controlled the mother. In essence, he was trying to create ideal, absolutely obedient people devoid of their own will. What was even more terrible was that his experiment partially succeeded. The eldest son, Alexei, although he managed to escape from home, was found in Novosibirsk in a state of severe psychological maladaptation. He could not function normally in society, suffered from severe phobias and addictions. The middle daughter, Maria, was studying in Moscow, but as it turned out, regularly came home for supporting sessions with her father. She was also in complete psychological dependence on her parents. Elena Zakharchenko told during interrogations that she herself was her husband's first subject. They met when she was a student at the Faculty of Psychology, and he was her teacher. Victor applied to her the same methods of psychological control that he later used on the children. She could not resist his will, although over time she began to realize the horror of what was happening. He controlled every aspect of my life, she told investigators. What I eat, when I sleep, who I talk to. He isolated me from family, from friends, said that we were doing a great thing, that our children would become a new generation of people free from the weaknesses of ordinary people. Only years later I realized that he was just a psychopath reveling in power over others. Viktor Zakharchenko behaved completely differently during interrogations. He was calm, judgmental, and spoke about his research with the pride of a scientist who had made an important discovery. He did not show the slightest remorse, insisting that his methods were scientifically sound and aimed at the good of humanity. "You don't understand the significance of my work," he told investigators. "I have found a way to form absolute loyalty, absolute devotion. Imagine soldiers who will never betray, workers who will never lie, citizens who will always follow the rules. I have created a methodology that could change the world for the better." A psychiatric examination declared Viktor Zakharchenko sane, but with pronounced psychopathic personality traits. He was found guilty of torture, illegal imprisonment, causing grievous bodily harm, and sentenced to 25 years in prison. Elena Zakharchenko was recognized as a victim of psychological violence by her husband, but also as an accomplice to crimes against her own children. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but with the possibility of parole after serving a third of her term. The Zakharchenko children were placed under state guardianship and sent for long-term psychological rehabilitation. Specialists' forecasts were disappointing. All three children had severe, possibly irreversible psychological trauma. Especially severe was the condition of the youngest, Igor, who could not speak, had difficulty moving, and constantly demanded the presence of his mother. The investigation of the Zakharchenko case led to the discovery of several other families where similar methods were practiced. They were all connected with Victor through his underground network of researchers. In total, the investigation identified 15 such families in different regions of Russia. In each of them, children were subjected to similar abuse under the guise of scientific experiments. However, the most alarming aspect of the case was that the investigation never managed to establish the full extent of this network. There was compelling evidence that it was much more extensive and included people holding high positions in scientific and government structures. That is why the case was ultimately classified and kept secret. Journalists trying to investigate the Zakharchenko case were made to understand that it was better to leave this topic alone. The few publications that did appear in the press were quickly removed from the internet. Official sources refused to comment on anything related to this case. Anastasia Petrova, the young district police officer who started the investigation, was transferred to another region and promoted, but according to rumors before the transfer, she was strongly recommended to forget everything she had seen and heard in the house on Lesnaya Street. The Zakharchenko's house was sealed and then demolished. A small park was built in its place, in which none of the local residents preferred to walk. Neighbors who once complained about strange sounds now denied ever hearing anything unusual. Maria Stepanovna, the elderly woman who first raised the alarm, died of a heart attack shortly after the completion of the investigation. It would seem that the story is over. The criminals are punished, the victims receive help. The case is closed. But is that really so? In 2022, 4 years after the exposure of the Zakharchenko family, a strange document appeared on the internet. It was published by an anonymous user on one of the secure forums. The document was a report on the results of the Zakharchenko's experiment, dated 2019, that is, after the arrest of Victor and Elena. The report described in detail the results of medical and psychological examinations of the Zakharchenko children, as well as conclusions about the effectiveness of the methodology developed by Victor. The document was written in a dry scientific style without any moral assessments of what was happening. Apparently, it was intended for a narrow circle of specialists continuing research in this area. The most alarming thing in this document was the conclusion. The methodology showed high effectiveness in forming stable psychological dependence and loyalty. It is recommended for further study and development, taking into account the identified shortcomings. High degree of physical degradation of the subjects, the difficulty of maintaining the necessary conditions for a long period. A modification of the protocol is proposed using the X27 drug to enhance the effect without the need for physical contact with the object of impact. This document quickly disappeared from the network, but managed to spread across closed forums and attract the attention of independent investigative journalists. One of them, Sergei Volkov, began his own investigation of the Zakharchenko case despite the obvious risks. Volkov was an experienced journalist specializing in investigations of corruption and abuse of power. He worked in a small independent publication and had a reputation as a person who is not afraid to dig where others prefer to ignore problems. When the document fell into his hands, he immediately realized that this could be the most important case in his career. The first thing Volkov did was try to find Anastasia Petrova, the district police officer who started the investigation. Turned out to be not easy. After being transferred to another region, she seemed to disappear. None of the police departments to which the journalist turned confirmed that they had an employee with that name. In the end, through Anastasia's former colleagues from Vyazma, he managed to find out that she had resigned from the internal affairs bodies of her own accord and left in an unknown direction. One of Anastasia's former colleagues, wishing to remain anonymous, told Volkov, "After that case, she changed a lot, became nervous, suspicious, said that she was being watched. Once she came to work all bruised, said that she had fallen from the stairs, but no one believed it, and a week later she filed a report of resignation." As the next step, Volkov decided to find the Zakharchenko children. It also turned out to be not easy. All records of their location were classified. Journalistic persistence and connections helped him to get on the trail of the eldest son, Alexei. Alexei Zakharchenko lived in a small town in Siberia under a different name. He was 24 years old, but he looked much younger. Thin, with a pale face and dull eyes, he resembled a teenager rather than an adult man. He lived as a recluse, worked remotely as a programmer, and almost never left the house. Volkov was able to meet with him by posing as a social worker. Alexei reluctantly let him into his apartment, small, ascetically furnished, with curtains drawn. On the table was a photograph of a young woman with a child in her arms. It was Elena Zakharchenko, his mother in her youth. "Why did you come?" Alexei asked nervously, tugging at the sleeve of his sweater. "I am not violating the terms of the protection program." Volkov decided to be honest. He told Alexei about the document he found and about his investigation. "I want to understand what was really happening in your family," he said. "And most importantly, is it still happening in other places with other children?" Alexei was silent for a long time, looking at the floor. Then he looked up at the journalist. "You don't understand what you are getting into," he said quietly. "This is not just the story of one crazy family. It's much more." After long persuasion, Alexei agreed to tell his story, but took a promise from Volkov that his name and whereabouts would remain secret. What he told shocked even the seasoned journalist. "My father was not crazy as everyone thinks," Alexei began. "He was part of a large research program. They studied methods of mind control, creating absolute loyalty. At first, these were ordinary psychological experiments, but then they moved on to more radical methods." According to Alexei, his father worked in a secret laboratory where various methods of psychological impact were studied. There he became acquainted with the theory that prolonged breastfeeding in combination with certain psychoactive substances can create a special form of attachment bordering on complete submission. When I was born, my father decided to test this theory on me, Alexei continued. His voice trembled. He made my mother breastfeed me much longer than they usually do for years, and at the same time gave me some drugs. I don't know exactly what it was, but they changed my mind, made you pliable. Alexei said that as a child he did not realize the abnormality of what was happening. For him, it was an ordinary life. He was completely dependent on his mother, could not eat regular food, and felt severe discomfort when she was not around. I began to understand that something was wrong only in adolescence. When I began to communicate with other children at school, I was different, could not function normally without my mother nearby. Teachers noticed this, began to ask questions. Then my father took me out of school, said that he would teach me at home. At home, Viktor Zakharchenko continued his experiments, increasing the doses of drugs and methods of psychological impact. Alexei recalled that he often spent whole days in a semi-conscious state, connected to some devices that his father had installed in the basement of the house. He recorded everything: my reactions, changes in behavior, physiological indicators. Sometimes other people in suits with serious faces came to us. They examined me, discussed the results with my father. I was just a guinea pig for them. When Alexei turned 16, he decided to escape. By that time, he already had a younger sister and brother who were going through the same experiments. Alexei understood that if he didn't escape, he would never break free from his father's control. I saved money that my mother secretly gave me. I prepared for months. But the most difficult thing was overcoming the physical addiction to mother's milk. I was literally breaking down like a drug addict. Convulsions, hallucinations, unbearable pain, but I endured. Alexei ran away at night through the window of his room. He only had a backpack with the most essential things and a little money. He made it to the train station and left in the first direction he could find. The first few months were hell. I couldn't eat properly, was constantly sick, and didn't understand how to live independently, but gradually it became easier. I learned to cope with the cravings for what I was addicted to, found a job, rented a room, and started a new life. Alexei didn't know what was happening in his family after he ran away. He didn't communicate with his parents or younger siblings. Only several years later, after seeing a news report about the arrest of his father and mother, did he learn that his sister and brother had continued to be victims of experiments all that time. When I found out about my parents' arrest, I felt relieved. I thought the nightmare was over. But then I received a call from a man who introduced himself as an intelligence officer. He said that he knew who I was and where I was. He told me that I should forget about the past and never talk about what happened in our family. Otherwise, I could be declared insane and sent to a mental hospital for the rest of my life. Alexei listened and remained silent all these years. But now, telling his story to Volkov, he seemed both frightened and resolute. "I've been silent for too long," he said. "I'm afraid that the same thing has happened to other children during this time. My father always said that our family was just a prototype experiment, that in the future his methods would be applied on a much larger scale." Volkov asked if Alexei knew anything about the current whereabouts of his brother and sister. Alexei shook his head. "I've tried to find them, but without success, as if they simply disappeared. This worries me the most." After meeting with Alexei, Volkov was even more convinced that he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than the story of one perverse family. He decided to dig further and find out who was behind Viktor Zakharchenko's experiments and whether they were still continuing. The journalist's next step was to try to find the scientific institute where Viktor worked before starting his home experiments. This proved to be difficult. There was no mention of such an institution in official sources, but in archival documents from the 90s, Volkov found a reference to the Institute of Psychological Adaptation, a closed institution that was involved in research in the fields of psychology and neurophysiology. Through former employees of other scientific institutes, Volkov managed to learn that the Institute of Psychological Adaptation did indeed exist and was involved in research at the intersection of psychology, pharmacology, and neurobiology. Officially, The institute studied methods of psychological rehabilitation for people who had experienced traumatic events and developed methods for working with post-traumatic stress disorders. But according to rumors, other, much more ethically questionable studies were also being conducted there. One of the former employees who agreed to speak with Volkov anonymously said, "The institute was divided into two parts. An official one, which conducted open research, and an unofficial one, where only a select few were allowed. There were rumors that they were studying methods of behavior control, creating stable psychological dependencies, and modifying personality." Viktor Zakharchenko was one of the leading specialists in this closed part. According to this source, the research in the closed part of the institute was funded not only by the state but also by some private structures. There was a lot of money involved, and the results were impressive. They really learned how to change a person's personality and make them more manageable. In 1996, a scandal occurred that led to the closure of the institute. One of the test subjects who participated in the experiments committed suicide, leaving a note describing in detail what they had done to him. Inspections began, and a criminal case was opened, but everything was quickly hushed up, and the institute was simply disbanded. Most of the employees were transferred to other institutions, and some went abroad. Viktor Zakharchenko resigned of his own accord. It was said that he decided to continue his research independently, but no one knew that he would use his own children for this. This information confirmed Alexei's story and explained much of the methodology that Viktor Zakharchenko used. But the main question remained open. Are such experiments still continuing? Now, after the arrest of Viktor and Elena, Volkov found the answer to this question in the most unexpected place. While reviewing documents in the Zakharchenko case, which he managed to access through an acquaintance in the prosecutor's office, he noticed a strange detail. After the parents' arrest, the youngest son, Igor, was sent not to a regular rehabilitation center, but to some special institution, the name of which was classified. Volkov began searching for information about this institution and found out that it was located in the Moscow region and was officially listed as a specialized scientific and medical center for the rehabilitation of people with post-traumatic disorders. But upon closer inspection, it turned out that this center had very limited access, was guarded like a high-security facility, and there was practically no information about what was happening behind its walls. Through one of his sources in medical circles, Volkov managed to contact a former employee of the center, a nurse named Irina Kravchenko. Irina worked there for only 3 months and quit because, according to her, she could no longer participate in what was happening there. The meeting with Irina took place in a small cafe on the outskirts of Moscow. The woman looked frightened, constantly looked around, and spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. "I shouldn't be telling you this," she began. "I signed non-disclosure agreements, but what's happening in this center is a crime against humanity." According to Irina, the center contained not only children from the Zakharchenko family, but also other patients with similar symptoms. Teenagers and young adults with deep psychological traumas, completely dependent on certain stimuli or people. But instead of treating them, the center's doctors continued to study their condition, effectively continuing Viktor Zakharchenko's experiments. "They don't treat these children," Irina said. Her voice trembled. "They study them like laboratory rats, take tests, record reactions. Some are given experimental drugs, supposedly to alleviate their condition, but in reality to see how their behavior changes." Irina was especially horrified by the fact that new patients were appearing at the center, children who were not related to already known cases, such as the Zakharchenko family. "Where do they come from?" she asked. "Who conducts the initial experiments on them before they get to the center?" This means that there are other similar families somewhere, where children are being subjected to the same things that Zakharchenko did. Irina said that she once overheard a conversation between two of the center's doctors. They were discussing some new method that allows them to achieve the same results as Zakharchenko's method, but without the need for physical contact with the subject. They mentioned some drug with the code name X27, which can be added to food or water. They talked about it as a breakthrough, Irina recalled, as something that could be used on a much larger scale. One of them said, "Imagine if we could add this to the water supply of an entire city." They were laughing, but I'm sure they weren't joking. After this conversation, Irina decided to quit. She tried to tell her friends about what was happening at the center, but no one took her seriously. Some advised her to contact the police or the FSB, but Irina was afraid that she would simply be declared insane or, even worse, arrested for divulging state secrets. I was silent all this time because I was afraid, she confessed to Volkov. But when I saw your publication about the Zakharchenko family, I realized that I had to tell the truth. People need to know that these experiments are continuing, that they are becoming even more dangerous. Volkov asked if Irina had seen Zakharchenko's youngest son, Igor, at the center. She nodded. Yes, he was there when I worked there. The most difficult case. An 18-year-old boy with the mind of a 5-year-old, completely dependent on mother's milk, unable to eat regular food. He was constantly given injections and had tests taken. He was always crying and calling for his mom. According to Irina, the other Zakharchenko children were also at the center. The middle daughter, Maria, and the eldest son, Alexei, who was allegedly found and brought there by force. This contradicted what Alexei had told Volkov. Either someone was lying, or Irina had seen someone else whom she had been introduced to as Alexei Zakharchenko. The information received from Irina was too serious to be published without additional verification. Volkov decided to find at least one more witness who could confirm her words, but this proved impossible. All the center's employees remained silent, and the journalist's attempts to enter the facility were unsuccessful. The security was too tight. Nevertheless, Volkov began preparing an article based on what he had managed to learn. He understood that publishing such material was associated with risk, but he considered it his duty to tell the truth about the ongoing inhumane experiments. The day before the planned publication, while returning home late in the evening, Volkov noticed that he was being followed. A black car without license plates was slowly driving behind him on the deserted street. The journalist quickened his pace, turned into an alley, then into another, trying to get away from the pursuit. But when he came out onto a busier street, two men in dark suits approached him. "Sergei Volkov?" one of them asked. "We need to talk to you. Come with us." They didn't introduce themselves or show their IDs. They simply grabbed the journalist by the arms and led him to the car. Volkov tried to resist, but realized that it was useless. The men were much stronger than him. He was placed in the back seat of the car, and the car drove off. "Where are you taking me?" Volkov asked. "You have no right to detain me without explaining the reasons." The men remained silent. One of them took out a syringe and, before Volkov could do anything, injected him. The last thing the journalist remembered was a feeling of heaviness in his limbs and a strange metallic taste in his mouth. When he regained consciousness, he found himself in a small, well-lit room without windows. He was lying on a bed, dressed in hospital pajamas. There was an IV drip in his arm. Volkov tried to get up, but felt that he could not move either his arms or his legs. They were tied to the bed. The door opened, and a man in a white coat entered the room. He was a middle-aged man with a neat goatee and glasses in a thin frame. He smiled at Volkov, but his smile didn't reach his eyes, which remained cold and assessing. "Welcome, Mr. Volkov," the man said. "My name is Dr. Sergeyev. You are in our research center. Don't worry, everything will be fine. We just want you to forget some things that you've learned recently. It's not a complicated procedure, completely painless." Volkov tried to scream, but found that he couldn't make a sound. His throat seemed paralyzed. Dr. Sergeyev noticed his panic and shook his head. "This is a temporary effect of the drug," he said. "It will pass soon. In the meantime, relax and listen to me carefully." He sat down on a chair next to the bed and began to speak in a quiet, monotonous voice. "You've learned too much, Mr. Volkov. Things that ordinary people shouldn't know. Our work is very important for the future of the country, for the future of all humanity. We are looking for ways to make people better, more perfect, to rid them of unnecessary fears, doubts, and even the possibility of betrayal and insubordination. Imagine a society where there is no crime, no wars, no protests or revolutions, a society where everyone is happy because they simply cannot be unhappy." The doctor spoke for a long time, explaining his philosophy, his vision of the future. For him, experiments like those conducted by Viktor Zakharchenko were just the first step towards creating a new humanity. Yes, there are victims, he admitted, but sacrifices are necessary for a great purpose. The first generation always suffers the most, but their children and grandchildren will live in a world free from pain and suffering. When Dr. Sergeyev finished his speech, he took a small vial with a clear liquid out of his coat pocket. "This is our latest development," he said proudly, showing the vial to Volkov. "The very substance X27 that you learned about from our former employee. It has unique properties. It erases certain memories, leaving the rest untouched. You will forget everything related to the Zakharchenko family, to our center, to your investigation, but you will remain the same person with the same skills and knowledge." He added the liquid to the foredrip that was connected to Volkov's arm. "Don't be afraid," he said, seeing the horror in the journalist's eyes. "It's completely painless. You'll just fall asleep, and when you wake up, you'll remember that you decided to stop investigating the Zakharchenko case due to lack of evidence. You'll return to your normal life, to other journalistic investigations, and you'll be happy, I promise." Volkov felt the cold liquid flowing through his veins. A fog began to form in his head, and his thoughts became confused. The last thing he saw, before losing consciousness, was Dr. Sergeyev's face, still smiling with his cold smile. 3 days later, Sergei Volkov returned to the editorial office of his publication. His colleagues asked him where he had disappeared and why he hadn't answered his calls. Volkov apologized and said that he had been busy with an investigation, but had reached a dead end and decided to postpone the topic for a while. No one noticed that his gaze had become slightly absent, and on his neck, under the collar of his shirt, there was a small scar, a trace of the injection of the drug X27. The investigation into the Zakharchenko family case was officially closed. Viktor and Elena were serving their sentences in different colonies. According to the official version, their children were undergoing rehabilitation in specialized centers and were gradually returning to normal life. The house on Lesnaya Street was demolished, and a new one was built in its place.